AAMplify, a podcast series from the Association for Accounting Marketing. I am Katie Tolin with CPA Growth Guides, and I am your host for today's session. Joining me today is Gregg of Inavero. He is the founder of the company. It's actually a research company that helps professional service firms with both client satisfaction and retention. He's also a sponsor of AIM's newly released Compensation Trends Survey, and we're really excited to have Eric join us today. Welcome, Eric.
Thanks, Katie. I'm looking forward to the chat.
So I know the survey really looked at compensation and specifically what people make, and I know that's what everyone wants to know, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I thought we could talk a little bit about some of the trends that you uncovered in the survey because they're a bit interesting, especially around job satisfaction. So tell me what you found out. Are we happy in our jobs?
Yeah, actually, that was one of the interesting things that we did look at, and we do try to look at a more all-encompassing engagement as a part of the compensation, because compensation obviously is a huge part of that package, but it's not the only part of that package. And what we found is pretty interesting. 9 in 10 actually say that their firm is a great place to work, so people are really quite happy with their organization and with the firm that they work with. Only about 20% say that they expect to change jobs in the next 12 months, which compared to other industries that we look at is actually not bad. It's about average. But when we ask about satisfaction with their compensation, or if they feel like they're paid fairly compared to their peers, that number drops down to about 3 in 10 that feel like they're paid fairly or that they're compensated fairly. So we have a tremendous amount of pride in this space, in what we're doing, the marketers, and how we're impacting our firms. And in general, we think our firms are pretty great places to work. However, we do feel like the compensation really lags the amount that we're putting into that. Now, we see that in every industry. It is a little bit more acute in this industry than we see in many of the other industries that we look at employee satisfaction with compensation.
So I thought it was interesting, too, because you really looked at job satisfaction, and I think a component of that was the amount of time that marketers and business developers are putting onto the job. So talk to me a little bit about, what we're working, what kind of hours we're working, and what we're doing with our time.
Yeah, it's definitely not a 9-to-5 job, and certainly anybody listening to this or watching this, that's not going to be any surprise. In fact, we found that about 2/3 of people are working more than a traditional 40-hour work week, and about 1 in 4 of the accounting firm marketers are consistently report working 50 or more hours. And that's really caused a little bit for concern because when we look at those that are working 50 or more hours, about 80% of those reported feeling somewhat or very overwhelmed in their jobs. And it's not surprising that the number of hours on average increases pretty significantly as the role increases. So those that are in a marketing director, CMO, business director type role, they tend to be more involved with kind of carrying the brand flag at external events, and they tend to be asked to do more and to be involved in more things firm-wide, and that tends to really push them into a situation where they are working more hours. And so that's a challenge, something that we see is being important to watch. If you're managing a marketing team, just know that at that 50-hour mark, if you're up and over that on a very consistent basis, you're going to start to really run the risk of burning out your team.
And I'm assuming that, we're looking for work-life balance just like everyone else in the workforce these days, correct?
Yeah, that's right. And that's where some of the flex, time, that came in as the number one perk being offered. About 77% of people say that they have flexibility in their schedules. That's something actually that this industry does better than a lot of the other industries that we've looked at. That's actually a pretty high number. These roles tend to have a lot of flexibility, but they're also tend to be asked to do a lot. And so that's, I think, a lot of times the trade-off that we end up making. As you can imagine, not only do a lot of people have flexibility in their schedule, but it was overwhelmingly the most popular perk that is being offered. We do see about 40% being offered cell phones, that is paid leave, summer hours. About a third of people are getting pieces of that. But really it comes down to that flexibility of schedule and having the autonomy to really work the hours that are needed, but the flexibility to not completely hang up on your life while you're at your work.
Now, I know you looked at salaries by job title, roles and responsibilities. And for the first time, AIM actually asked you to look at, as part of the survey, business developers. Can you talk to me a little bit about the types of roles that were included as part of the salary survey?
Yeah, so we included a number of roles, and we actually expanded it a little bit from the 2011 study just to really reflect how marketing teams are really getting a little more progressive in terms of the roles that they have, and accounting firms are starting to manage parts of their business and their business development more like traditional non-professional service firms. And so we're seeing, for example, that director of business development role becoming a little more prevalent. There's still plenty of firms that don't have that, but what we looked at was marketing partner, CMO, we looked at director of marketing and communications, we looked at marketing manager, we looked at marketing or communications coordinator, marketing assistant, specialist, graphic designers. We actually had just enough to report on graphic designers and firm administrators. And then within the business development field, we had director level and also business development manager. So we're really trying to, and I suspect as we move forward, we'll continue to look at those pieces. One thing to keep in mind, Katie, is that that the roles and the responsibilities can really change. A marketing specialist in one organization does at times very different things than a marketing specialist in another one. So when we do the profiles, we did also list out the 5 responsibilities that are most commonly associated with each of these roles, to at least give people a little bit of a snapshot. I might be called a marketing assistant, but I might be really doing the role of a marketing coordinator. And so hopefully they'll have the ability to kind of, right size their own title based on some of that information as well.
Now, you said that, we looked at business developers, and a lot of firms don't have those yet, but what can you tell me a little bit about the people who completed the survey? What does basically the demographics of our industry, and especially those people who took the survey, look like?
Well, this won't shock anybody who's been to one of the AIM events, but we're predominantly female. About 84% are female. And this is interesting because that's not just those that responded to the survey. And it probably makes sense to talk a little bit about the survey methodology at this point, too. We went out and we surveyed marketers, but for the compensation-related data, which included gender, we actually got that information directly from the HR departments of the firms that participated. And so when we looked at that piece of it, it came back for all of the nearly 300 different individuals that we got compensation data for. 84% were female. On average, they've got about 6 years in their position, and as you look at it, they've got about 16 years of marketing experience. So we're a pretty well-heeled group in that regard. The firm size, the median firm size, was about 80 employees and about 20 million in revenue. But we did have exposure to some of the largest and candidly some of the smaller firms that had marketers as well. It's a tremendous cross-section of the industry. I was really pleased, and AIM actually, and specifically the board of directors, deserve a lot of credit for this, for really pushing this out and saying, look, as an industry, we need to have really credible information, and the only way we can do that is to get participation.
I thought it was interesting that you said the compensation data itself came from HR. What was the reasoning behind that?
The reason behind that was a concern, real or perceived, that if we have self-reported data from marketers, that we're maybe missing or reporting that in not as precise a way as we would get from the HR departments. And so it was decided that for this, on the compensation side, we want to kind of remove ourselves. And in addition to that, there's times when even marketing leaders don't necessarily have the compensation-related information for the rest of their team. And so we really wanted to get a firm-wide picture of what that marketing team looks like, and the compensation and the challenges and information around that as well. So that was why we really looked at a blended model to try to get that. Let's get responsibilities from the marketing team members. Let's get compensation from the HR departments.
So really, it's just giving us a good picture and an honest picture of what's out there.
Yeah, I'm a survey research geek. The more credible that data can be, Katie, the happier that I am. And you just can't get any more credible than going, short of getting somebody's W-2, you can't get any more credible than going to the HR department.
That's great. So let's look big picture salary. So what did we see in trends with salaries? Have they increased? Are they decreasing? And, what do we think they're going to do in the future?
Yeah, they have increased. It's a modest gain is what we saw in 2015. What was interesting is we also asked HR departments to give us an idea on expected compensation increases for the next year. And what we saw is that the typical marketer saw a 5.2% increase in their total comp in 2015. They saw a 4.9% increase in their base salary. So the majority of that increase came in base salary. Now, when we asked people to project 2016, we only asked them to project base salary because truly, when you look at the variable components of compensation, it's just too much to ask somebody to try to estimate how that's going to grow. And what we found is the expectation for this year is a little bit lower. It's 4% compared to the 4.9% that we collectively got typically last year. Now, it does change pretty dramatically based on the position that you have. When you're looking at a marketing partner or a CMO or a director of marketing role, those all receive more than a 5% increase in compensation. But if you look at like a marketing specialist role or a coordinator role, they were down a little bit lower than that. So again, it does depend on role. That's why it's important to look at both the actual and the expected by role within the full report.
Now, I know we can't get into, all of the salary information that came out of this. There's just not enough time. But let's take marketing coordinator. I mean, that's a pretty popular role in most firms today. So what can you tell me a little bit about your typical marketing coordinator? What are they making?
Yeah. So let's start a little bit about who this is. A typical marketing coordinator in this position, and we had over 50 marketing coordinator positions analyzed and salary information analyzed for that. So we had a really nice response there. What we find in that is that only 6% are male. So in a female-dominated space, it is a remarkably female-dominated role. On average, they have about 1.7 years with the firm, about 3.4 years of experience. So on a typical firm, it's their second, maybe third job out of college. Their most common responsibilities, they're looking at website marketing materials, doing the advertising, and a lot of the management of those activities as they move throughout the execution of that strategy. But typically what we found is that their total compensation, their median total compensation was $47,400. In the report, we show actually the range from the 25th percentile to the 75th percentile. And within that range, it gives you a really good mix of what those compensation ranges really are. Now, in 2015, they grew their compensation, their total comp, by 4.7%. Their expected gain in 2016 base salary is actually 4.6%. So they're expected to do a little bit better in their gain, even though they were a little bit below the average last year. They're making that up in terms of what HR departments say they're expecting to increase that salary position into this next year.
So when you looked at salary, did you break it down, or are the only metrics, everyone in the U.S., North America, area, or do we have, did we look at it perhaps by geography or some other criteria?
Yeah. So one of the things that in the initial conversations, I think we came to great clarity on was that it really doesn't matter, for example, in the U.S., if you're West Coast versus East Coast so much. It matters whether or not you're Seattle, Washington versus, say, Salem, Oregon, right? And so the size of the market actually has more to do with compensation and changes in compensation. And then certainly the size of the firm has a difference as well. So what we did is we broke it into the top 20 metro areas in the U.S. versus everybody else. And then we also look at differences based on the firm size. So if you're a firm that's less than 20 million, between 20 and 50 million, or greater than 50 million. We break out the compensation roles and changes on each of those at that level.
Okay, so it's great. So there's good ways to benchmark it. You could look at it overall. You could look at it, where are you at? Are you in one of the big markets or not? Or by firm size. So it seems like there's a lot of information for people to judge where they fit within the realm of compensation.
That's right.
So I feel like we've got to talk a little bit about business developers.
Sure.
That's a huge thing with compensation, and I know their incentives, their commissions, their bonus makes up such a huge part of their compensation. And the survey couldn't look at that. We were looking more at the base salary. So let's take a business development director. I think, it's probably a more popular title.
Yep.
What do we know about at least the base comp of a business development director?
Well, we have base comp for 2015 at about $106,000 for a business development director. Now, total comp, as you say, ranges dramatically, but what we do know is that 70% of them do have a variable component to their compensation. The vast majority typically do. We also know that when you look at their gain in total compensation in 2015, the median reported gain in total compensation was not that much. For 2015. As you can imagine, they're not expecting a big gain in base salary in 2016. Most of that gain is going to come through the variable component of their compensation package. When we look at that, obviously the things that they're up to most often and why a lot of them report significantly higher than average work weeks is that they're out prospecting, they're calling, they're part of the meetings and the pitches as a part of this, and typically they're supporting a significant number of shareholders and accounting professionals, and so they're kind of pulled a lot of different directions. So we see them as being highly variable in the compensation, as you pointed out, and also pulled in a lot of different directions at times.
So I know the entire survey, if people were to look at it, would have these exact same breakdowns for every title that we looked at. So what I have for you is really a two-part question. So if I'm looking at this survey and I'm a marketer or a business developer, what should I do with it? And on the reverse, if I'm a managing partner, an HR director, a COO, a firm administrator in a firm looking at this report, how should I use it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So let's start with the marketer perspective on this. And I think if you're a marketer or managing a marketing team, I think it's important in both of those cases to realize one thing, and that is that this data, as good as it is and as insightful as it is, and I really do believe that it is both of those things, it's one piece of information. You never can capture all of the nuance of a particular firm or a particular position based on this. You just don't have enough marketers in our space to be able to be that granular. But it does provide a benchmark that we can look at. And especially as you look at the gains in compensation and the expected gains in compensation, that's a great way to look at it. I would actually counsel people to look at the median compensation and the range of compensation and look at the responsibilities there. And first of all, decide, is this position, that's my title, but is that really the position that I'm in? And is this the right comparison? Or maybe I'm a coordinator, but I'm really doing more of a director role or a manager role. Let's look at that and kind of view that point of it. And then the second piece of that is to then look and see, do I feel like I'm within that range given the entirety of my employment package? And I think that's something that we have to really keep in mind, is that there are places where you're going to get paid less and you're going to get more in other ways. You're going to get more balance. You're maybe going to get more autonomy. You're going to get additional perks perhaps. And so look at it from the totality. Now, if you're firm leadership, I think that it's a little bit different how you handle this report. I think you have to really dive in, and I think you have to really understand, what is it that I'm asking my marketing team and my business developers to do? Is it reasonable, number one? And am I compensating for it at the right level? And if I don't feel that I can afford to compensate it at the level of what their peers are being compensated at, then we have to take another look at what and reset either expectations or reset something along the lines of our pricing structure to make that available. I think people are starting to recognize the impact that a really savvy professional marketer or business developer can have on their firm, but I'm not always certain that we've caught up yet as to making the investment for those individuals as well.
I think probably the most valid point of that is really matching what you do to the roles and responsibilities and not the titles, because so many firms hire marketers. They know they need to have marketers, and then they ask them to do things, but I don't know how closely they check to see if the title matches what they should be doing. So, rather than saying I have a marketing manager, are they paid right? Let's make sure that the marketing manager is really doing those things that our survey looks at for a marketing manager.
That's absolutely right. Are we expecting the right things, and if we are, do we have the right person, to be able to do that? And if we have that right person, are we compensating them at the level for what we're expecting them to do?
So where can people get a copy of this report or just more information about it?
Yeah, so the report is available through AIM, and it is available on the website. There's a steep discount. It's literally 50% off if you're an AIM member, so a great member benefit. But you can go onto their website, and under publications, you can see information about the study and how to get access to the full report.
Okay, and since I have you here, there's like one thing I have to ask you about. I keep hearing about this thing that Inavero is doing about the Best of Accounting Awards. Why don't you give us a little information about what that is and how I, as a firm, might be able to participate?
Well, as a marketer by trade, the mere fact that you've heard about it excites me. We're launching for the first time what we consider at Inavero our quest to identify and reward the accounting firms in this space that provide the top client satisfaction. So if you're a great service providing firm, we're going to do a survey that's going to go out and essentially establish who those top firms are, and we're going to recognize them with the first annual 2016 Best of Accounting Award for top client service. And we view that as an opportunity to first and foremost independently validate that you're delivering the type of service that you say you're delivering and that you want to be delivering. And if you aren't, give you the information to improve that. But if you are delivering that, we need to give people proof on that. We're professional service organizations. We sell on service and on referrals and on the great experience that we provide, but it's very difficult to differentiate on service when everybody is selling on service. So we want to put the structure on that and independently validate those that are providing great service and give them a leg up in the marketplace.
I know differentiating that is incredibly challenging for marketers, so it's nice to have a little proof to help say that you actually do deliver what you promise.
That's right. Yeah, we're excited. We've had some really nice early adoption. Sign-ups are happening now at bestofaccounting.com, and so we're really excited with the program, and we view it as a way to really elevate the perception of accounting firms, of the right accounting firms, the ones that really take service seriously.
Well, thank you for joining us today. I think you gave us a lot of great information about this, compensation issue that seems to unsettle a lot of marketers, as everyone wants to make sure that they're fairly compensated. So thank you for your time.
Absolutely, and thank you, Katie, and thank you, of course, to AIM for partnering with us on this survey. We look forward to many more opportunities to bring additional research and information to this group, and look for the launch of Best of Accounting in 2016.
Well, this wraps up another episode of Amplify. Please watch for another episode next month. And remember, if you want information on the survey, go to the AIMS website, and that's accountingmarketing.org. There's a publications tab, and under that, surveys, and you will find that there. There's a free executive summary of the results that's available to anyone who goes. So please be sure to check that out, and remember to aim high. We'll talk to you again next month. Thanks.